Hi there, welcome along to Language Open Learning. My name is Ajan Ken, and today we're looking at the English Grammar course number 2, and we're talking about the past tense. Now this is the second part of a two-part lesson. This video lesson runs alongside the PowerPoint presentation on the website. If you're not on the website and looking at YouTube or such like, at the bottom you'll see a link. If you click that, this will take you onto the website, and you can watch the video and the presentation on the website direct. Now, the first part of the past tense, we looked at the past simple tense. Today we're going to be looking at the past perfect. Now, when we look at the past perfect, we ask, how is this formed? Well, the past perfect is essentially formed with the auxiliary verb had plus the past participle. The past participles are split into regular verbs and irregular verbs. Now, it's important, especially for the irregular verbs, that you become knowledgeable of what they are. So there'll be another lesson on the LOL website to look at the irregular verbs. But let's look at the form for a regular verb. For example, the past perfect form, we can say, I had decided. I had decided. The auxiliary verb had and the past participle, had decided. Or we can say, she had left. She had left. Or we can also say, we had eaten. We had eaten. Now again, in English, as with much of English, we like to contract or make smaller the words. So when we use the past perfect form, we contract the verb or the auxiliary verb had. So for example, I had decided becomes I'd decided. If we say she had left, then we say she'd left. Or we had eaten, we can then say we'd eaten. So we always try and contract when we're speaking in English. What about questions and negatives? Well, questions are formed, again, as with much in English, by inverting the subject and the auxiliary verb. So for example, we can say she had left. We can ask the question, had she left? We swap had and she. She had left. We then say, for a question, had she left? Our voice goes up. Okay, so had she left? For negatives, we use the word not. Okay, not. And we use it also as well with contractions. So for example, we can say, she had not left. She had not left. But this is contracted, so we can then say, she hadn't left. She hadn't left. Again, with contractions, if you're looking to speak good English, try and make use of the contractions. You'll find that it becomes a lot easier to speak. The sentence actually flows a lot better. So with contractions, we can say she had not left. We can say she hadn't left. So what does the past perfect mean? How do we use it? With the past perfect, we use it to show clearly that one past event happened before another past event. So one past event happened before another past event. And we use the past perfect for the earlier event. Okay, so for example, let's look at Peter. Peter left at 7 a.m. Peter left at 7 a.m. Two actions. Peter left at 7 a.m. and we arrived home at 8:30. Okay, so Peter left the house, left home at 7 a.m. and we arrived at 8:30. If we put that into a sentence, we can say, when we arrived at Peter's home, he had left, or he'd left. When we arrived at Peter's home, he had left. So the two actions there, Peter left the house at 7 and we arrived at 8:30. So when we arrived at Peter's house, he had left. It's not really necessary to use the past perfect if we use before, if we use the word before or after to make the time a sequence clear. Okay, so it's not necessary to use the past perfect if we use before or after to make the sequence clear. So for example, although many speakers do show that there's a strong connection between the two events. So I'll give you an example. Sue left the house before we arrived. Sue left the house before we arrived. Or we can say, Sue had left our house before we arrived. Sue had left our house before we arrived. We can also say we arrived at Sue's house after she left. We arrived at Sue's house after she left. Or we can say we arrived at Sue's house after she left. So you can see, note that it's not necessary to use the past perfect just because an event happened a long time ago. We would use the past simple there, okay? So it's not necessary to always use the past perfect just because an event happened a long time ago. We would use the past simple for that. For example, the Chinese built the Great Wall over 2,000 years ago. Okay, so there we're using the past simple. So let's look at the past perfect continuous. The past perfect common uses. What is it used for? Well, the past perfect is often used with verbs that we use for thinking. For example, think, know, be sure, realize, remember, suspect, or understand, etc. So these are all verbs that we use with our mind, like feelings verbs, I guess. So for example, we can say, I thought I'd seen you before, but I hadn't. Or I thought that I'd seen the movie before, but I hadn't. David knew he had seen her somewhere before. David knew he'd seen her somewhere before. Or Amy was sure she hadn't locked the door. Amy was sure she hadn't locked the door. When I got home, I realized I'd lost my wallet. When I got home, I realized that I'd lost my wallet. And the inspector suspected that the thief had used a special key. Okay, so the inspector, he suspected that the thief used a special key. So let's look at used to, U-S-E-D, to, used to. Used to describes a habit or a state in the past. Okay, it describes a habit or a state in the past. So there's no present form. Used to suggests that the action or the situation is no longer true, and so makes a contrast with the present. Okay, so used to is a habit in the past. It doesn't happen now, and there's like a contrast between then and now. So for example, we can say, I used to have long hair, but now I have short hair. He used to play guitar, but now he doesn't. He used to drink coffee, but now he drinks tea. Okay? It's used for repeated actions, but not for single events. Okay? So used to is for a repeated action, something that you do quite a lot of, or a habit, if you like. So with questions and negatives, how do we use used to? Used to, with questions and negatives, becomes use to. We drop the D. Okay, used to becomes use to. Okay, so for example, did you used to have long hair when you were younger? Did you used to have long hair when you were younger? Or I didn't used to play the piano when I was young, but now I do. Okay, so in the past tense we use, for questions or for negatives, the used to, U-S-E-D, becomes use, U-S-E, to. Pronunciation is quite similar. This is why I was spelling it. Used to is pronounced, almost sounds like with a T on the end, used. Okay, used to. The T and the D become become kind of mixed together. So it seems like it should be used to, but it's actually used to, used to. Okay, so if you can practice that one. With the difference between the past tense of the verb use, okay, so for example, this would be pronounced used, okay, and this is the past tense of the verb used, okay. Let's look at would. Now, would is used in the same way as used to, in that, but only describes repeated actions. It doesn't describe a habit, it just describes repeated actions in the past and not states. So it's more common with writing rather than speech. In speech, we would say used to. When we're writing, we would say would. For example, on winter's day, we would sit around the fire. Or on winter's day, we used to sit around the fire. Both mean much along the same lines. I used to own a motorbike. I used to own a motorbike, but not I would own a motorbike. Okay, so watch out for that one. So the past perfect and the past simple. Let's look at these. I'll give you a couple of examples. Situation 1. The film starts at 8 and I arrive at 7:50. Okay, so that's the situation. The movie starts at 8 o'clock, but I arrive at 7:50. I would say I arrived, because the past tense, I arrived at 7:50 before the film started. I arrived at 7:50 before the film started. So that's simple in the past simple tense. We can also say, when the film started, I had arrived 10 minutes before. Okay, and then it becomes the past perfect. So when the film started, I had already arrived 10 minutes before. So can you see the difference there? I arrived at 7:50 and the film had not yet started. But then if we change it to the perfect tense, we can say that I arrived at, when the film started, I had already arrived 10 minutes before. Situation 2, the film starts at 8 and I arrive at 8:10. We can say the film started at 8, but I arrived 10 minutes late. Past simple. In the past perfect, I would say I arrived at 8:10, but the film had already started. Okay? I arrived at 8:10, but the film had already started. So look at the situations again. Situation 1, I arrived, and the movie starts at 8, I arrive at 7:50. I arrived at 7:50 just before the movie started. Past simple. Past perfect, when the film started, I had already arrived 10 minutes before. Perfect tense. The movie starts at 8 and I arrive at 8:10 in the past simple. The movie started at 8, but I arrived 10 minutes late. Past simple. Past perfect, I arrived at 8:10, but the movie had already started. Okay? To describe these situations, it's possible to put the past simple for both, to emphasise as in the first two. It's also possible to put the event that happened into the past perfect, as in both. So we showed you there how to change the situations to use both the past simple and the past perfect. Generally, when we're speaking, we'll always use the past perfect, the past simple. It's much easier to say and much simpler to understand. Note that the past simple and past perfect are also used in the conditional sentences, the if sentences, but these have a different meaning, which we'll come on to in another lesson. So that's the end of the past perfect or the past tense lesson for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can rewatch this video lesson, or you can have a look at the presentation on the website. Once you've finished, there's a green button at the bottom, and you can then take the past tense test to see how much you know and how much you've learned. For those that pass the test, we've got a certificate of achievement to give you to keep for showing other people that you're very good at English. So thanks very much for watching, and this is a John Ken saying thanks very much and goodbye for now. Bye for now.